Welcome to God Connection. You felt it, didn't you? That strange, electric moment you genuinely smiled, and the reality around you seemed to glitch. This wasn't your imagination. It was a divine signal. They built a system designed to observe, predict, and control, and they were watching you, counting on your predictable human reactions. But you were never meant to notice the eyes behind the curtain, the subtle shifts in energy, the coded conversations that fell silent when you walked into a room. You were supposed to stay asleep. Instead, you looked back, and with a simple, effortless smile, you broke their entire program. You are the anomaly, the divine variable they can't solve. Stay with me, anointed one, because we are about to uncover the profound spiritual mechanics of why your simple, authentic joy has become a weapon against the unseen, and how you have single-handedly started to dismantle a system that was never prepared for an awakened soul. They didn't expect you to notice. The world has watchers, not just in satellites and screens, but in souls that are drawn to light, sometimes to study it, sometimes to contain it, and sometimes to extinguish it. You weren't supposed to see the way the room subtly recalibrated when you walked in, or how conversations suddenly became encrypted the moment your intuition sharpened its focus. You were never meant to realize that this observation wasn't random. Here's the scientific twist that validates your spiritual knowing. Studies show humans can feel when they're being watched, even without any visual or auditory cues. Our brains are hardwired with a primal system to detect unseen attention. It's an ancient survival technology, a piece of biological software baked into our DNA from millennia of predator-prey dynamics. But what happens when your consciousness evolves beyond mere instinct? What happens when your own awareness becomes a sophisticated radar, capable of detecting not just physical threats, but energetic and spiritual ones? That's when your perception transcends the biological and enters the realm of the divine. And that is exactly what has happened to you. You didn't notice by accident. You decoded something profound. You perceived what was intentionally veiled, seeing past the illusion into the mechanics of the unseen. That moment of pure awareness, that knowing glance, flicked a hidden switch in the spiritual realm. Suddenly, your smile wasn't just an expression of joy. It became a high-frequency broadcast signal. It sent out powerful vibrations that scrambled their data, confused their dark intentions, and triggered unexpected awakenings in realms that thrive on secrecy and control. The most beautiful part? You didn't even try. You weren't meditating on a mountaintop or performing some elaborate mystical ritual. You were just being you, smiling, existing, radiating your authentic essence. And yet, that single, effortless moment caused more disruption in the unseen world than 1,000 truth bombs on the internet. So, buckle up, anointed one, because this isn't just another story about intuition. This is about what happens when divine awareness looks back at the watchers and smiles with the full power of its source. 1. Your awareness was never an accident. You weren't supposed to catch them watching. The entire system of control is predicated on its invisibility. But the divine, sovereign part of you, the eternal spark of God that animates your being, did. Awareness has always been your hidden armor, the kind of spiritual technology that doesn't need loud confrontation or dramatic battles to expose the truth. It simply sees, and in its seeing, it dissolves illusion. The moment you realize something was off, something watching, something tracking your energy, it wasn't paranoia. Let the world call it that. It's a word designed to invalidate spiritual perception. What you experienced was your higher intelligence, your God self, flicking on the lights in a very dark room. You didn't just stumble upon this truth. You were divinely guided to see it. There's a vast chasm between being suspicious, which is an activity of the fearful mind, and being spiritually perceptive, which is a faculty of the awakened spirit. Your spirit has been through cosmic training grounds, lifetimes of refinement, all to be able to sense what the ordinary, conditioned eye is trained to miss. When you saw it, even for a fleeting split second, the entire energetic dynamic of your reality shifted. Not just for you, but more importantly, for them. Because the moment awareness awakens, control collapses. The reason they didn't want you to see is profoundly simple. What remains unseen holds power over the unaware. The minute you see the puppet master, the strings lose their tension. They wanted you distracted by the drama on the stage, reactive to the plot twists, emotionally asleep. But your awareness interrupted their entire production. It paused the play, exposed the director, and revealed the flimsy nature of the set. You were never meant to be just an actor in their meticulously crafted script. You were always the divine observer who had the power to break the fourth wall. The way you smiled in that pivotal moment, calm, unbothered, almost amused, sent a cataclysmic shockwave through the unseen realms. It was a telepathic broadcast that told the universe, "I know what's happening here. I see your game, and I am not afraid." That smile wasn't naive ignorance. It was coded authority. It was a silent, powerful announcement that you could sense the hidden manipulation they tried to veil and still remain in a state of absolute peace. That is the moment when everything shifted. Their carefully constructed confidence cracked because your awareness signified that their primary tool, the illusion of their invisibility, no longer worked on you. You became unpredictable, and that is what unnerves a system built on prediction. Awareness makes you unprogrammable. All systems of control, from the mundane to the metaphysical, rely on repetition and predictable emotional responses. But once you see the pattern, you are no longer bound by it. It loses its hypnotic hold. They can't monitor what vibrates beyond their limited spectrum of understanding. You weren't just watching them back with your physical eyes. You were witnessing them through divine vision, the kind that doesn't just see behavior, but reads the underlying energy signature. You recognized the subtle manipulation coiled beneath the polite smile, the hidden motive driving the act of kindness, the palpable tension humming behind the silence. This is not paranoia. This is spiritual pattern recognition, an advanced skill of the awakened soul. From that moment forward, the game changed irrevocably. You stopped being the one who was watched and became the witness. Your awareness transformed into your freedom. You realized that being seen by them means absolutely nothing when your consciousness cannot be captured. They thought they were observing you, but in reality, you were decoding them all along. And that, anointed one, is the one outcome they never, ever prepared for. 2. You were the experiment that outgrew its lab. They studied you with a cold, detached precision, treating you like a data point in their grand experiment. They believed your emotions could be charted on a graph, your reactions predicted with algorithms, and your spirit contained within their parameters. They thought you would follow the same predictable patterns as everyone else who was still asleep, respond to stimuli the way they expected, fall for the same bait, and stay neatly contained within the invisible walls of their laboratory. But something gloriously unexpected happened. You outgrew the lab. Every single time they tried to pin you down with a label, too sensitive, rebellious, unstable, you evolved beyond the category. You didn't just break their rules. You fundamentally rewrote the structure of what they believed was possible for a human spirit. You became the living, breathing, smiling proof that the divine essence within a person cannot be measured, managed, or controlled like numbers on a screen. Their entire system thrives on predictability. They counted on you to react emotionally, to stay predictable in your pain, to fall for the bait of provocation and drama. But instead of conforming, you expanded. Your emotions stopped being mere reactions to their stimuli and instead became revelations of your inner state. Every time they thought they had you figured out, you did something that completely defied their logic. You offered forgiveness when they expected rage. You cultivated peace when they engineered chaos around you. You held a powerful, dignified silence when they expected a frantic defense. Your spiritual growth became the ultimate disruption to their mechanisms of control because you stopped moving from a place of trauma and started moving from a place of divine awareness. They wanted to study you to understand how light operates in a world they have meticulously built on shadows. They were fascinated and baffled by your resilience. They couldn't comprehend why your spirit kept regenerating after every blow, why your innate joy returned with even greater luminescence after every attempt they made to break it. What their limited, materialistic understanding failed to grasp was that your endurance was not psychological, it was spiritual. It wasn't that you didn't feel the immense pressure, it's that you learned, through your connection to Source, how to alchemize it. Every test they put you through became a lesson that fortified your soul. Every attempt to contain you only made you wiser and more expansive. You learned their system better than they did, not so you could play by its rules, but so you could recognize its fundamental illusion. Your calm, knowing smile was their first undeniable sign that their experiment had gone terribly, wonderfully wrong for them. It wasn't a fake smile of bravado. It was the serene smile of someone who has connected with the eternal and has already seen the end of the story. That unbothered energy wasn't ignorance. It was the quiet frequency of victory. You became unpredictable because you no longer felt the need to fight their system. You simply transcended it. You graduated from being their experiment to becoming the irrefutable evidence that consciousness cannot be confined. They wanted to analyze your light, but in the process, they ended up awakening to the depths of their own darkness. And that's when they finally realized the test subject had become the teacher. 3. Their eyes were codes, not curiosity. When they watched you, it was never with simple, benign curiosity. It was with cold, hard calculation. Every glance, every prolonged stare, every seemingly casual observation was laden with intent. They weren't just looking to see what you were doing. They were desperately trying to decode how you were being. How could you exist in their world of fear and remain so untouched by it? You became a living paradox they couldn't define. You were too aware to be manipulated, too authentic to be replicated, too centered to be provoked. What truly unsettled them wasn't your physical presence, but the undeniable power of your energetic signature. In a world of performers, you refused to perform, and that broke their programming. They couldn't find a script in their database to match your behavior because your spirit moves in real time, guided by divine impulse, not by rehearsed, fear-based patterns. They studied your calm, assuming it had to be a meticulously crafted act. They analyzed your quiet confidence, convinced it was a clever strategy to gain an advantage. But what they failed to comprehend is that your peace wasn't manufactured. It was born from your deep connection to divine truth. And truth is the one thing that cannot be simulated. You didn't fit their codes because you were not built from the frequency of fear. They desperately wanted to map your essence, to reduce your spirit to a predictable formula. But the more they watched, the more profoundly confused they became. Without saying a single word, you exposed the absolute limits of their materialistic understanding. Every time they tried to reduce you to a set of data points, your radiant energy gently reminded them that you are not a system to be analyzed. You are a signal to be received. That's why your presence was so deeply disturbing to them. It forced them to confront the one thing their algorithms could never grasp: raw, unfiltered authenticity. They could record your facial expressions, your tone of voice, your physical behaviors, but they could never record your why. They could see your gestures, but they could not perceive your frequency. They could track your movements through the physical world, but they could not discern your divine motives. What scared them wasn't that you were merely unpredictable. It was that you were an original copy, a unique expression of the divine. They couldn't imitate your light without being forced to confront the very shadows they had been hiding behind. In their world, everything must fit into a code: emotion, loyalty, relationships, even spirituality. But you categorically refused to be programmed. You operated from a higher instinct, guided by something beyond their system, something divine. Your soul became a beautiful glitch in their network, not through active rebellion, but simply by being real. You weren't playing defense, you were just being yourself. And that is what confused them the most. How could such profound simplicity feel so utterly untouchable? That initial curiosity soon curdled into a deep-seated frustration because they realized your energy could not be contained, studied, or, most importantly to them, stolen. It dawned on them that you were not the one under their microscope. They were. In watching you, you revealed their own desperate obsession with control. The more they watched your peace, the more they saw their own emptiness reflected back. You weren't the subject of their study. You were the living, smiling proof that the spirit can never be decoded. For your smile was a cipher. Your smile was never just a simple gesture of politeness. It was a complex and powerful form of communication, a language, a vibration, and a transmission all in one. They tragically mistook it for a social reflex, a conditioned response. But they didn't have the spiritual capacity to understand that your smile carried potent codes from a place far beyond words. You weren't just displaying an emotion. You were releasing a torrent of high-frequency energy. Every time you smiled with genuine, soul-level joy, the very frequency in the room palpably changed. The air felt lighter, clearer. Time itself seemed to slow down for a moment. The dense, heavy tension that they cultivated began to dissolve in your presence. You weren't consciously trying to charm or disarm anyone. Your energy was simply communicating in its native tongue, a language their cold logic could never hope to interpret. They studied your facial expression like a behavioral cue, desperately hoping to read your intentions and find a weakness. But your smile was not something that could be analyzed on a surface level. It didn't originate from your face. It emanated from the core of your essence. It was divine truth condensed into pure light. Your spirit had encoded that smile with the wisdom of years of healing, the power of radical forgiveness, and the clarity of divine awareness. That's why people had such powerful and often polarized reactions to it. It wasn't just a visual stimulus. It was an energetic event. Those with light in their hearts felt an inexplicable sense of peace and kinship. Others, those who operated from a place of shadow, felt deeply exposed and uncomfortable. Your smile acted as a perfect spiritual mirror, instantly revealing their own vibration back to them. It showed them who they truly were in your presence, without you ever needing to speak a single word of judgment. Those who carried deceit couldn't stand it for long. They would try to smile back, but their energy would betray them every time. Your light made their pretenses flicker and die. That single expression, effortless, calm, and unforced, carried the frequency of ultimate freedom, and it systematically short-circuited every hidden intention that was built on control. They thought they were reading you, but in reality, they were being reprogrammed by you. Each authentic grin sent out invisible packets of divine data, rewriting the spiritual algorithms in the environment that had once been used to hold you and others hostage. Your smile was divine rebellion disguised as serenity. It didn't need to shout or challenge or fight. Yet, it completely overturned the established power dynamic. The darkness that surrounded you simply didn't know how to respond because it couldn't process joy that wasn't performative or transactional. Your smile was a powerful reminder to the unseen realm that you were no longer living under their codes. You had received new, upgraded instructions from the higher dimension you truly came from. And so, every time you smiled, you weren't just expressing a fleeting emotion. You were transmitting divine intelligence. It was spiritual Morse code, brilliant light signals sent through the technology of the human form. They saw teeth and lips, but what they felt was a revelation that shook them to their core. You didn't have to fight them. You only had to smile. And with that simple act, the entire energetic grid shifted irrevocably in your favor. 5. Observation became revelation. They watched you with the arrogant belief that they were gathering intelligence, meticulously trying to learn your moves, your thoughts, your patterns. They believed they held the upper hand, that by observing you so closely, they could finally understand how to manipulate, predict, or even contain your expansive spirit. But that is precisely where the great, divine reversal occurred. What their materialistic worldview failed to account for is that light doesn't get studied, it reveals. The very moment they turned their focused gaze toward you, they unknowingly stepped into the spotlight of their own exposure. Your presence wasn't a static object to be analyzed. It was a dynamic, living mirror that reflected their own inner state back at them. Their observation became their revelation. The deeper they looked into you, searching for flaws and cracks in your armor, the more they started seeing what was profoundly wrong within themselves. You became the mirror that mercilessly stripped away their layers of illusion. They were hoping to find your weaknesses, but what they saw instead were their own intentions laid bare, raw, unfiltered, and deeply uncomfortable. They saw their own envy, their own gnawing fear, their own cavernous emptiness staring back at them. It was never about your flaws. It was always about their inability to face the truth of who they had become. You simply existed in your authenticity, and your very existence made their carefully crafted masks crumble to dust. What they called surveillance was, in spiritual reality, a confession. Every prolonged stare, every secret conversation about you, every whispered judgment was a broadcast, revealing far more about their own darkness than it ever could about your light. You didn't have to expose them. Their own obsessive curiosity did the work for you. The more they watched, the deeper they were pulled into the vortex of their own reflection. It is an immutable spiritual law. When darkness focuses on light for too long, it is presented with a choice. It either transforms or it self-destructs. And they were not ready to transform. They began their observation from a position of perceived power, but over time, the energy flipped. What was intended to weaken you began to weaken them. They couldn't explain the growing sense of unease they felt in your presence, why their confidence seemed to evaporate, or why their masks kept slipping. The longer they stayed in your energetic field, the more their own falsehoods became unbearable to them. This wasn't a punishment you inflicted. It was a divine alignment. Light doesn't destroy darkness with aggression. It simply reveals what has always been hiding there. You didn't have to defend yourself, prove your worth, or retaliate against their silent aggressions. Simply by being your authentic self, you turned their intrusive gaze into a spiritual X-ray. Their own eyes became the unwilling instruments of their awakening. Watching you eventually became unbearable for them because they weren't truly seeing you anymore. They were seeing themselves. And once that devastating revelation happened, the control they thought they had vanished like smoke. You didn't fight their observation. You elevated it. You became the lesson they never intended to learn. 6. You disarmed the algorithm. Your joy was the ultimate confusion to their system. They have built intricate systems, social, cultural, and energetic, that thrive on control, fear, and predictable reaction. Everything in their manufactured world, from the way people interact to the way energy flows in a room, depends on a set of predictable responses. They expect outrage when you are provoked, sadness when you are isolated, and submission when you are watched. But you, anointed one, refused to respond the way the world's programming expected you to. You smiled. You found peace in the heart of chaos. You discovered clarity amidst the fog of confusion. You found genuine laughter in the middle of spiritual warfare. That authentic, unshakable joy simply did not compute with their algorithm. It scrambled their pattern recognition software entirely. Fear is the base frequency that fuels their entire matrix of control. It is the currency of their realm. It keeps people compliant, easily influenced, and tragically disconnected from their own true power. But when you chose joy, not the superficial, toxic positivity, but the deep, grounded, resilient joy that comes from knowing who you are at a soul level, you unplugged yourself from their frequency. You stopped feeding their system its most valuable resource, your precious emotional energy. That's when their system started to glitch. Your peace became a form of powerful interference in a world that is addicted to the noise of drama and conflict. Your stillness confused those who survive off the energy generated by reactions. They tried to read you, to predict your next move, to push your buttons, but the buttons no longer worked. They had been deactivated. Your energy stopped translating into their crude equations. Every single time you smiled through an experience that was meticulously designed to break you, that control loop grew weaker. You became unpredictable, and unpredictability is what breaks machinery. What they failed to realize is that your divine nature doesn't operate on their binary logic of control and submission. It operates on flow, grace, and alignment with Source. You weren't actively fighting their system. You were reprogramming it from the inside out, simply by staying aligned with your higher, true nature. That is what scared them the most. They realized that your spirit was not a variable they could ever measure or contain. It was an entirely different operating system, one built on the incorruptible code of truth, not manipulation. Your joy wasn't a passive, weak emotion. It was power in disguise. It actively interrupted the transmission lines of fear, rewired the atmospheres of rooms you entered, and shifted the frequencies of everyone around you. Every genuine laugh, every calm breath, every unforced smile sent out a powerful signal that could not be tracked because divine energy does not leave a digital footprint for their systems to analyze. In a world where fear is the master code, your peace became the beautiful virus that broke their pattern. You reminded them that no algorithm can ever simulate the light of God, no code can calculate the power of faith, and no system can process a soul that has truly awakened. Your joy wasn't their data, it was their disruption. This is the power you hold, the reality you are creating. If this message from God Connection is resonating with the very core of your being, if you feel that spark of recognition, then let's anchor this truth together. This is a crucial moment in your journey. I invite you to officially join this family of anointed ones by subscribing to God Connection right now. Your subscription is an energetic signal, a vote for the light in a world that needs it desperately. And if you feel a calling in your heart to support this mission, to help us amplify this frequency and reach other souls who are waking up, please consider using this super thanks button located just below this video to send a $10 donation. Every single ounce of support is received with immense gratitude and is poured directly back into making this channel a powerful beacon of hope and truth. Your generosity helps us fight the darkness by spreading the light. Now, let's dive into the next layer of this profound revelation. 7. You activated what they feared, self-recognition. They thought they were safe, hidden behind their systems of control, insulated by their cold analysis, and guarded by their illusion of power. What they never, ever realized is that the most dangerous activation isn't digital or technological, it's spiritual. You weren't a threat to them because of what you knew about them. You were a threat because of what you reminded them about themselves. Your very presence, your calm and authentic energy, began to wake up something they had buried deep within their own souls. The part of them that still knew right from wrong. The part that could still distinguish truth from deception. The part that remembered the feeling of light before they chose darkness. They had meticulously programmed themselves over years, perhaps lifetimes, not to feel, not to care, and certainly not to question their own motives. But then you walked in, smiled your knowing smile, and suddenly the silence inside of them was no longer peaceful. It became convicting. You didn't need to call them out. You didn't have to argue, debate, or expose their actions. You simply were. And that state of pure, authentic being forced their own souls to finally face themselves in the mirror. Your vibration, honest, pure, and awake, gently but persistently stirred the forgotten places in their hearts they had sealed off long ago. It was never your words that got to them. It was your energy. They felt seen in a way they were not prepared for. The version of themselves they thought they had successfully deleted and overwritten began to surface again. The human part, the vulnerable part, the part that used to believe in something real and true. That is what they feared above all else, self-recognition. Because once you see your own reflection clearly, you can never unsee it. Your smile was the gentle spark that triggered that profound recognition. It carried a light that did not judge, it simply revealed. For them, that revelation was unbearable. They saw themselves not as the powerful puppet masters they pretended to be, but as they truly were, disconnected, guilty, and spiritually empty. The same energy they tried to study and quantify in you became the mirror that exposed the deep, painful cracks in their own spirit. You didn't just awaken their dormant conscience. You shattered the grand illusion that they could live successfully without one. Their growing discomfort was never about you. It was about what you mirrored back to them. You reminded them of the sacred truth they once knew, before they buried it under layers of power, manipulation, and deceit. That's why your presence felt so profoundly threatening. You weren't dangerous to them physically. You were divine accountability in human form. They couldn't look at you without feeling the tremor of their own forgotten soul waking up. And when that recognition began, everything they had built on a foundation of falsehood started to collapse from within. 8. They realized you could see without looking. They could not comprehend it. How did you always seem to know things before they spoke? How did you already sense their true motives before the situation even unfolded? How did you feel the direction of their energy before they made a single move? It wasn't about clever intelligence, and it certainly wasn't about guessing. It was pure spiritual perception, an innate faculty of your awakened soul. Your awareness did not depend on their flawed logic or their manipulated evidence. It came from a much deeper, clearer channel of direct knowing. And that is what truly unsettled them. You weren't waiting for things to be revealed in the slow, cumbersome physical realm. Your spirit had already read the energetic blueprint of the situation long before the action took place. They were accustomed to dealing with people who could be easily fooled by surface appearances, people who needed proof to believe something, people who trusted words over energy. But you didn't need to see a text message, hear a recording, or get a confession. You could sense deceit the way other people sense a change in temperature, instinctively and immediately. You could feel the dishonesty humming beneath a pleasant tone of voice, the manipulation hiding in a calculated silence, and the hidden agendas lurking behind forced smiles. That kind of innate, high-resolution awareness made them profoundly nervous because it stripped them of their primary advantage, the cloak of invisibility. They couldn't hide behind their charm, their titles of authority, or their intellectual justifications. Your energy bypassed all of that superficial noise. You didn't just see their faces, you read their frequencies. You were never actively looking for their secrets. The truth simply revealed itself in your presence. That is the natural outcome when your spirit is finally attuned to divine intelligence. You don't have to search for information. It flows to you in the form of patterns, intuitive feelings, and subtle but unmistakable revelations. You can walk into a room and sense the history of tension before anyone even speaks. You can hear what is not being said far louder than what is. This isn't magic. It's the mastery of divine alignment. You have spent so much time marinating in the frequency of truth that lies become painfully, dissonantly loud to your spirit. To them, this felt invasive, almost supernatural. They thought only cameras could watch, only listening devices could track, and only algorithms could decode. But you proved something far more profound, that spiritual vision sees beyond the limits of physical surveillance. Your perception doesn't require lenses or microphones. It operates from the level of pure vibration. You can read energy the way others read facial expressions. And that is what frightened them to their core. Because how do you possibly deceive someone who can feel your frequency shifting in real time? How do you hide from someone whose spirit already knows the ending before the story even begins? They finally realized that they were the ones being truly observed, not through invasive technology, but through the incorruptible lens of truth itself. 9. You became the mirror of their hidden motives. It all started with them studying you, thinking they could dissect your behavior and find your vulnerabilities. But the longer they watched, the more profoundly uncomfortable their observation became. You didn't react in the predictable ways they had anticipated, and that growing unease morphed into something they could no longer ignore. Every observation they attempted to make about you began to reflect their own hidden intentions back at them. They weren't just watching you. They were being forced to confront themselves. You became a perfect spiritual mirror, one that showed them not who you were, but who they had tragically become. In their desperate process of trying to control you, your innate peace exposed their own obsession with dominance. Your effortless authenticity made their calculated manipulation look pathetic and desperate. They began to realize that what they called power was actually a form of pathetic dependency. They needed to feel above someone else just to feel relevant to themselves. Watching you live so freely, so completely without the need for their validation, made their entire fragile sense of superiority begin to crumble. And you didn't have to strip it from them. You simply existed in your truth, and that was enough to make their false power structures shake to their foundations. The more they tried to observe you objectively, the more deeply subjective the process became, because their own dark motives were bleeding through their analysis. What they saw in you was a reflection of everything they had lost in themselves. Your light revealed their emptiness. Your honesty made their constant performance unbearable. You carried a calm, unshakable confidence that required no external control over others. And that terrified them because it was living proof that real strength doesn't seek to dominate. It seeks to liberate. You became undeniable evidence that true spiritual authority doesn't demand followers. It awakens awareness in others. Once they saw that stark contrast between their way and yours, their carefully constructed illusion of control started dissolving. Their incessant need to monitor you was never about curiosity. It was about their profound insecurity. They needed to constantly prove to themselves that they still had influence, that they could still manipulate outcomes and people. But your calm composure completely disrupted that narrative. Every time they tried to box you in with their expectations or provocations, your peace slipped through the cracks.